welcome back to Mrs. Riley's maths videos, and today we are looking at surds. Just in case you're not sure what a surd is something like root 7, or the square root of 11, the square root of 42, and so on. Some surds that we know have nice answers. For instance, the square root of 16 is 4, the square root of 25 is 5, the square root of 100 is 10. So these are all surds. It's just that some of the surds have nice answers, and they have nice round answers when this is a square number. Okay, so we're looking at some rules today, which will be in the first exercise of your surds booklet. The first rule says if we have root a and we square it, we get a. The second one says when we have b times root a and we square it, we get b squared by a. So these are very like the rules of indices, if you remember the rules of indices. Here we've got the square root of a over b will be the same as the square root of a divided by the square root of b. And the square root of a multiplied by the square root of b will be the same as the square root of a times b. Let's look at a few examples and see if that helps. So the square root of a all squared equals a. Well, that makes sense, doesn't it? The square root of 5 all squared means the square root of 5 by the square root of 5, which would be 5. Okay, because that would be any number. If we've got its square root and then we square it, we're going to get the number, aren't we? So the square root of 3 squared is 3, and the square root of 17 squared is 17. Okay. Second rule says if we have a number multiplied by a square root in brackets and it's all squared, then the number is squared, which gives me b squared, and root a is squared, which gives me a. So 3 root 2 all squared will be 3 squared by root 2 squared, which is 2. So 9 by 2, which is 18. 5 root 7 all squared will be 5 squared by root 7 squared, which is which is 25 by 7, which is what, 175. 2 root 5 squared means 2 squared by root 5 squared, which is 5, which is 4 by 5, which is 20. The next rule, the square root of a divided by the square root of b. So the square root of a divided by b equals to the square root of a divided by the square root of b. So if we have two numbers as a fraction underneath the square root, we can simplify it, if it helps, by finding the square root of the top divided by the square root of the bottom. And here you can see it is helpful because square root of 16 is 4, the square root of 9 is 3. So we can therefore find out the square root of 16 over 9. Square root of 100 over 49 is going to be the square root of 100 over the square root of 49, which is 10 over 7. The square root of 100, which is over the square root of 25. Well, we could say that that's 10 over 5, which is 2, but for the purpose of this rule, I'm going to go up here and I'm going to say it's the square root of 100 over 25, which is the square root of 4, which is 2. So we could, of course, have said here this is 10 over 5, which is 2, but I just wanted to show you how the rule worked. Square root of 98 over the square root of 2. Well, neither of those has a nice square root. Let's just split it up again into one fraction underneath the square root, or join it together, I suppose. The square root of 98 over 2, which of course is the square root of 49. And the square root of 49 is 7. So actually that was the rule working very well for us there. Final rule, root a by root b is equal to the square root of a times b. So root 10 by root 10, as we'd expect that to be 10, but let's see how this rule works out, is equal to the square root of 10 by 10, which is the square root of 100, which is 10. Square root of 18 by the square root of 2 will be the square root of 18 by 2, which is the square root of 36, which is 6. Square root of 3 by the square root of 27 is the square root of 3 by 27, which is the square root of 81, which is 9. Square root of 32, well, can we use this rule to help us do something called simplify surds, which we'll be doing a lot of in a little while. The square root of 32 is, of course, the same as the square root of 2 by 16, isn't it? Which would be the square root of 2 by the square root of 16, which would be the square root of 2 times 4, or as we write it, as 4 root 2. Now, you'll be doing a lot of that in the coming days, so hopefully you get a handle on it. Let's do this one here and see whether you can get it this time. So 98, what I'm looking for with all these is I'm looking for a number that's a square number, the biggest possible square number that I can find that goes into these. So for 32, for instance, 32 was 2 times 16. That's the one I used. If I hadn't seen that, I could have said, well, 32 is also 4 times 8, and I could have continued that. 8, you see, is 4 times 2, so that would be the square root of 4 by the square root of 2, which would be 2 root 2. And 4 is, the square root of 4 is 2. So what I've had would be 2 by 2 root 2, which would have been 4 root 2, which is what I got with the square root of 32. If you notice that, I got 4 root 2. So it doesn't really matter if you don't choose the biggest one first of all, or you can't see the biggest square number. What you can do is just choose any square number that goes into it. So 98, hopefully at this stage you'll have thought, now you thought that's the same as 2 by 49. So the square root of 2 by the square root of 49, which is root 2 by 7, or 7 root 2. The square root of 200 will be the square root of 100 by 2, which is the square root of 100 by the square root of 2, which is 10 root 2. Okay, so I hope that helps, and I hope that you'll be able to work through the first booklet, the first pages of the booklet, or the first page of the booklet satisfactorily today.